Hey, it's Ben, and this is Drambo by BeepStreet. This video is going to walk through the new switch modules, switch 1N and switch N1, which are under the mixer section. They are switch modules, so they allow you to, in the case of switch 1N, take one input and then select which output you want to send it to. And you can see you can add more outputs. So there's an arbitrary number of outputs for one input. For switch N1, there's an arbitrary number of inputs. There may be some limit, but there doesn't appear to be any meaningful limit. As many inputs as you want to one output. And you can manually switch just by selecting which output or input you want to use. And then you can also hook up a signal to switch through an index. So you can MIDI control or modulate through your inputs or outputs. And for each of the switch modules, there's different modes. So there's an instantaneous mode. There's like a smooth, sort of like declicking mode. And then what's really cool is there is basically an X fade or a crossfade between many different inputs or outputs, instead of a regular crossfader, which would just be an A and a B, or a 1 and a 2. So we'll look through just exactly how it works and then talk through a couple different ways that you can use it. So I'm going to start really simple. I'll get rid of everything that's in my tracks. You can use this to switch sound sources. So I'm going to build just like a real quick synthesizer. Do some finger movements as well. So what I might have is a couple different sets of oscillators that I want to use, and I want to switch between them. So what I'll do, I'm going to set these both up with a mixer. These little oscillator pairs, and then we'll switch between them. And maybe it's just the waveforms that I want to select between, or the tuning or something like that. Okay, so right now I would just be getting my input from this mixer. I'm going to add my switch, and I'm going to use the switch N1 because I have multiple inputs and I want to output it to one VCA. So for each input, it's going to start with 2, and you can add more. You'll see the input selector. So we'll take a mixer, take another mixer, and you can add inputs. So just click the plus sign. You get a new input. I pull up my keys. Turn this down just a little bit. Okay, so right now I'm getting input 1. And you can hear that if I make some changes. So if I want to hear another input or select another input, I can actually manually select it. So, right away, you just get into some new, easily made sound changes. You can run different oscillators. You could have, different samples and switch between samples. Now, I don't have a MIDI controller that I'm using right now. But this is MIDI learnable. So you can tap in and you could assign a MIDI controller just to switch through, and give yourself hands-on control. You can also switch through with any modulation signal. So first I'm going to do that just with a slider. And the modulation is looking for values 0 through 1. So 0 is going to be the very first input, and it's going to go all the way to 1, and 1 is going to be like the max input. And it will manually, it'll work with whatever number of inputs you have. So if you add more inputs, then 1 is always the max, 0 is always the minimum, or like first input, first and last. So if you want to get rid of an input, double tap and remove. You can also name them. I haven't done that yet, but you can name them. And then, so as I'm playing through, you can hear it's just like an instant change. If I change it to smooth, you don't hear too much right now, but I think it's meant to not have any big changes in amplitude where you'd get clicks or anything like that. And then X fade is going to morph between, not morph, but fade in and out between the inputs or outputs. So at the minimum index value, we're just hearing the first input, and then it will fade between them. And then at the maximum index value, you'll hear only the last input or output. So what's really fun, or what I've liked doing, is hooking up like an LFO or even an audio rate oscillator and kind of messing around with sound design. So let's do that. I'll add a modulator first. Do an LFO. So now it's switching between. So one thing to be mindful of if you're using modulation inputs, the switch is looking for values 0 through 1. So if you have a bipolar LFO, for half of the cycle, it's going to be below 0, and you'll just be on input 1. So you can change that with the LFO easily to unipolar. And if we change it from, now on smooth, you're still not getting any clicks. It's a little bit, I think you can hear it, instant versus smooth. And then on X fade, it's actually fading in between. So you can get into really fun territory if you modulate using an oscillator. So you can sort of hear just some odd, barely there, but there's some noise in the background. If we change the oscillator to non-aliasing, it'll get rid of some of that noise. And then, I haven't mastered this yet, but let's see. So remember, when it's at the 0 value, you're just hearing input 1, and when it's at the max value, you're just hearing input 3. It doesn't actually crossfade between the last input back into the first if it's going from 1 to 0. So user RS2000 helped me with this. You can kind of get around that by adding in, like, for however many inputs you have, you can double the first input with the last input. So that way your like effective last output, which was my like this oscillator pair, input 3, is going to fade back into your first, and then you won't hear any transition when it fades from 4 to 1 because it's the same input. And one reason I'm using the graphic modulator here is because I want to change a bipolar oscillator into a unipolar modulation signal, but then we can also kind of mess with the shape. Take snapping off. So just using this as like an oscillator sound design engine, it's really fun, but there's lots of other ways you can use this. So I'll get rid of this and we can look at the 1N switch. I'll dump that in 1N, and then let's just think about what we might want to do here. Maybe we want to send this through a couple different effects chains. So I might have maybe like a comb filter, and then chorus and some reverb, and then maybe like a pitch shifter and delay, and now I can kind of set this up to, be playing some music and then switch between different outputs and send this through different processing. And this is just one way that you can use this module. But first thing I need to do, I have a couple different modules here. I'll need to set up a mixer. Okay, so they're all the same color, so it is a little bit confusing, but comb filter is getting output 3, chorus is getting output 2, and that's going into reverb, and then pitch shifter is getting output 1, it's going into a delay. They're all going into the mixer. So now when I play, I can instantly switch between different effects chains. And of course it's MIDI mappable, so I could use that with a controller. I could use one of my UI items to fade between them, which I'll do now. So with index, you can then control it. And what's cool is that they're always listening. So I'm not, the inputs of my processing modules are always listening. So there's no, I'm not just shutting off the comb filter. I'm not just shutting off the chorus and reverb or the pitch shifter and delay. They're just not receiving any input anymore. And I can do the same thing with X-Fade. And, I don't know what we're going to hear, but we could probably do some cool stuff with modulating between these. So I'll do another LFO. Yeah, it's kind of just like morphing between Sounds kind of cool when it's smoothed out as well, not just fading. More clicks with the instant. I think you can hear that a little bit more here with the N1 and the 1N. So any sort of modulation that you'd want, and of course you could do audio rate with an oscillator. So the basis with N1, you can play with as many outputs as you want. With 1N, you can play with N1 as many inputs. 1N as many outputs as you want. But you're not just limited to audio signal and using it for like a processing chain or running in different sound sources. There's other ways that you could use this too. So one way that you can use this is to almost use like kind of like a sequencer for pitch. So what I'm going to do real quick, I'll add in just like a little synth tool oscillator, and what I'd like to do is control one of these with the new pitch ratio modules, which is really fun. And then instead of just having one pitch ratio, I'll have multiple pitch ratios, and I'll switch between them. So what this sounds like, I'll need a mixer. This is kind of like the ratio on the FM module. But you can control both the nominator and the denominator. So you can almost get into like, not microtonal scales, but between notes, basically. So it's kind of cool. So each of these will be a different and these sound kind of weird, probably because it's a cascading, and now they're actually getting, probably want to check this again. Okay. Okay, sure. So I can do, just add a modulator. It is kind of cool when it almost sounds like a chiptune sort of thing. And it'll work polyphonically. And I could have these go at like different rates for what note I play. So it'll be like polyrhythm sequences. I don't know, that's a lot of fun. If we actually did that at audio rate, it would sound even more wild, probably. Yeah. So the aliasing really does make a difference. Doesn't necessarily sound better all the time. I actually like the standard. But it does make a difference. If we went to smooth, it sounds kind of funky. And then crossfade is not always going to be what we want. Well, that sounds good to me. Or it sounds okay. Sounds better than smooth. But I like that. That sounds okay. So you can use it with pitch input. What else? You know, with the 1N, where you are sending one input to multiple outputs. You know, I just had an idea. You could send a gate to one of a couple different instruments. FM operator. Sorry, I'm kind of lagging a little bit today. It will make like a little drum noise. So I'm going to go to, I'll make a mixer for all three of these. Okay, so right now they're all looking for gate signal. They're all getting a gate signal. So you can hear all of them playing. But if I open up a 1 to N mixer, and I have 3 outputs, they're all going to get their gate from a different output. So now, FM operator, this little hat sound, which is very quiet. And then drum sound. So, you know, I could like P-lock this. It is P-lockable. Seems to like, I don't know if this is intentional, but it'll like snap to whatever most recent P-lock, I think. I'll just remove my P-locks. But then you can also just modulate this with like the random. So it's going to any one of these. Totally random. So, not the most interesting application here, but you can, you know, send a gate signal out to different instruments or whatever. Oh, you can do like morphing between chords. It's kind of cool. Just snap this away. So I'm going to add in 2 MIDI. I'll do 3. 3 MIDI chord modules. And I'm going to want to double up my triple MIDI to CV. And these are all going to just get their MIDI from the track. Okay, so we'll add in a chord. You won't hear it. Okay. You'll hear this one though. So if I wanted to, I could actually switch between the pitch information between these 3 MIDI to CVs, which are all getting their MIDI from the different chord modules. So go to my N1, boom, boom, boom. And now I'll get my pitch from FM operator. So I can sustain a chord, actually. I guess I'll need to do my other chords too. So now I can be sustaining a note, and I can switch mid-note to the pitch information from the other chord modules. And then when I get into sliding between these, it becomes even a little bit more fun. So smooth, not really any different. X-fade is kind of cool. It's not very precise, but it's actually crossfading the pitch between these different chord modules. And we might be able to make it a little bit more manageable if we kind of spread this out. So instead it's going to be like both switch inputs 1 and 2 are going to be from this one, 3 and 4 from the second, and then 5 and 6 from the third, and we won't use that 7th. So it's a little bit more precise, that's all. And I think there's something funky with like the voices here, depending on like what voice is engaged in the chord or voices, and if they actually like match up with the right voices that you want to switch between. But it's still really fun. So by adding in, you really have 3 inputs, but you can sort of span them out in terms of how you crossfade between them, so you can be more precise by adding in extra inputs here and then just doubling up or tripling if you need to. Let's just really quickly audio rate this, or LFO at least. That's stupid, but it's kind of cool. So now we're actually going between the chords at audio rate, and that does sound kind of cool. Okay, so you can do that if you want to. And then one other cool thing that the developer mentioned is that you can use this as almost like a wave shaper with sort of like static inputs. So we could do it with like knobs, 4 knobs, and 1. And we're going to use this as an oscillator. So how are we going to use this as an oscillator? What we're going to do is set these at different points. And then audio rate between them. Modulate them at audio rate. That's the correct way to say that. Graphic modulator, so that we can convert it from bipolar to unipolar. So now we're actually hearing the very rapid changes between these values, and you can kind of make your own wave, which I think is really cool. Wave shape. And if you wanted to, you can modulate the different wave points. And right now we're using the instant mode, but we'll change it to the smooth, which is not as audible. Let's do crossfade. And remember, there's that aliasing issue, so a lot of time for audio rate modulation, you want to turn off your oscillator aliasing. And again, using the graphic modulator, you can mess with the path as it goes through the switches. Yeah, I mean, I just think this is so much fun. So this is sort of like using the graphic modulator to make a wave shape, but now you can, on the fly, mess with your wave points and modulate them if you want to. Now, if you wanted to make this polyphonic, someone on the BeepStreet forum, I don't remember who, they mentioned that you have to make your knob or your slider or whatever polyphonic. So it isn't by default polyphonic. It's not a problem. You just have to make it mono to poly. And that's very easy to do. So let's reset this. So just to demonstrate, if you like this trick, I think it's really cool. Now it's polyphonic. And now you could modulate these like even polyphonically if you wanted to. Okay. So that's just an idea of all the different ways that you can use the N1 and the 1N switches. I've definitely messed around more with the N1 with inputs, but there's obviously a lot of cool things that you can do with the 1N output switch. If you come up with something really fun and you want to share it, make sure to upload it to patch storage. That was my cat jumping. Anyways, have fun.